The street was quiet, too quiet. When I first met Mr. Walters, my new neighbor, I had a strange feeling. I couldn't quite place it. He kept mostly to himself. This wasn't unusual for our neighborhood, but there was something about Mr. Walters. It was unsettling. Mr. Walters kept odd hours. His curtains were always drawn. I'd only see him late at night sometimes. He'd be taking out the bins, a shadowy figure in the moonlight. He never seemed to notice me, or maybe he didn't care. He received few visitors. No delivery vans stopped by. Except for the occasional grocery order left on his doorstep, there was no sign of a life lived. The lack of activity was unsettling. His home felt more like an empty shell than a place where someone actually lived. I tried to shake off the unease creeping into my mind. After all, everyone has their quirks. Mr. Walters was just a private person. There was no need for me to be suspicious, no need at all. It was a Tuesday or perhaps a Wednesday when I first truly encountered Mr. Walters. It was late, well past midnight. I was struggling with insomnia, plagued by anxieties I couldn't quite grasp. As I paced around my living room, I noticed a light, flickering in Mr. Walters' house. Curiosity drew me to my window. I peered through the darkness. The flickering light was coming from downstairs. It appeared to be the kitchen. I watched and waited. Then I saw him, Mr. Walters. But something was different. He was moving erratically, his shadow dancing wildly against the wall. It was as if he were arguing with someone. Yet I heard no sound. I watched, transfixed, as Mr. Walters suddenly stopped. He turned towards the window. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. Our eyes met. His face was unreadable in the darkness. For a moment I felt a chill run down my spine. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the light went out. Mr. Walters was gone. The next morning, the unsettling encounter lingered in my mind. The image of Mr. Walters' contorted shadow filled me with a sense of dread. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew something was amiss. Days turned into weeks. Mr. Walters was gone. I didn't see him at the window. His bins remained unemptied. The once flickering light remained stubbornly off. The house was shrouded in an eerie silence. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Speculation ran rife. Some suggested he had family elsewhere. Others hinted at something more sinister. The uncertainty fueled the growing unease in my mind. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The memory of that night replayed in my mind. The flickering light, the contorted shadow, and the chilling gaze from the darkness. Weeks later, a strange thing happened. I was checking my mailbox, sifting through bills and junk mail when I noticed it. A plain white envelope addressed to occupant. Intrigued, I tore it open. The letter inside was handwritten, the script shaky and uneven. It was from Mr. Walters. He claimed to be away, tending to a sick relative. He apologized for any inconvenience caused by his sudden departure. He assured me he'd be back soon, but something about the letter felt off. The tone was cold, devoid of any genuine warmth. And the handwriting, there was an odd familiarity to it. It sent shivers down my spine. Why would he write to me? Why not one of the other neighbors? The question swirled in my mind, and as I stared at the letter, a chilling thought took root. The handwriting. It was eerily similar to the handwriting on the grocery orders left on Mr. Walters' doorstep. Section 5, A Glimmer of Hope. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of Mr. Walters' disappearance continued to gnaw at me. Sleep offered no escape, my dreams haunted by flickering lights and contorted shadows. The letter tucked away in a drawer became a tangible reminder of the unsettling mystery next door. One blustery afternoon, a glimmer of hope appeared. A removal van pulled up outside Mr. Walters' house. Two men, their faces obscured by baseball caps, began unloading furniture. Relief washed over me. It seemed Mr. Walters was back. or at least someone was moving in. As the removal men finished unloading the van, one of them noticed me watching. He tipped his cap politely, a cigarette dangling from his lips. I seized the opportunity, approaching him with a question that had been lingering in my mind. "Excuse me," I began, my voice a little shaky, "but do you know where the previous occupant went?" The man frowned, taking a long drag from his cigarette. "Previous occupant? Lady, this place has been empty for months. We're delivering this furniture for the new owner." My blood ran cold. The removal men, their faces now etched in my memory, drove away, leaving me standing on the pavement, a sense of dread creeping back into my heart. Section 6, the secret room. My gut screamed something was wrong, very wrong. Driven by a force I couldn't explain, I found myself approaching Mr. Walters' house. The curtains were still drawn, the windows dark and lifeless, but I could have sworn I saw a faint light flickering from within. It beckoned me closer. Testing the handle, I found the front door unlocked. This struck me as odd. Why hadn't the estate agent secured the property? Ignoring the voice of reason, I stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, as if the house had been sealed shut for years, not weeks. I wandered through the rooms, each one shrouded in shadows. The flickering light I thought I'd seen was gone. Then at the back of the house, I stumbled upon a room I'd never seen before. It was hidden behind a bookcase, its entrance masked by a tapestry. My pulse quickened. This was unexpected, a secret concealed within an already enigmatic mystery. Pushing the bookcase aside, I peered into the room. It was small and sparsely furnished, with a single window casting a dim light on the objects within. A desk sat in the corner, cluttered with papers and strange trinkets. In the center of the room stood a gramophone. Its horn pointed eerily towards the door, as if waiting to blare out a warning. Section 7. He never left. As I stepped into the room, a sudden noise made me jump. It was the sound of rustling paper. It was coming from the desk. My heart hammered in my chest as I slowly approached it. On the desk, I noticed a diary. Its pages were filled with Mr. Walters' spidery handwriting. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached out and opened it. The entries were strange, filled with ramblings about shadows and whispers. Mr. Walters believed he was being watched, tormented by something he couldn't see. He wrote about seeing his reflection move on its own, hearing his name whispered in the dead of night. It was chilling. Suddenly, I heard a floorboard creak behind me. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Walters, but he was different. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide and wild. His skin was deathly pale, stretched taut over his bones. He looked like a ghost of himself. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "They don't like visitors." He took a step towards me and I saw something in his hand, a knife. It glinted menacingly in the dim light. I froze, my mind racing. Fear propelled me backwards, my hand frantically searching for something, anything to defend myself with. Section 8. "Gone without a trace. Leave!" he shrieked, his voice echoing around the room. "Leave before they get you too!" Terror lent me speed. I scrambled back, knocking over the gramophone in my haste. It clattered to the floor, its sound swallowed by the heavy silence. I scrambled out of the room, my heart pounding. I didn't look back. I ran through the house, my lungs burning, my legs heavy with fear. The front door loomed ahead of me, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Fumbling with the latch, I wrenched the door open and stumbled out onto the street. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my own home. I slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against it as I gasped for breath. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. Had I imagined it all? Had Mr. Walters truly been there, or was my mind playing tricks on me? I peered out of the window, my heart still pounding. The street was deserted. Mr. Walters' house stood silent and dark, just as it always had, but the curtains were now open. I could have sworn I saw a figure watching me from the window. The next morning I called the police. They arrived, skeptical but professional. I told them everything. About Mr. Walters' disappearance, the strange letter, the secret room, and the terrifying encounter the night before. They listened patiently, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They searched the house but found no sign of Mr. Walters. The room behind the bookcase was gone. The tapestry had vanished. It was as if it had never existed. Section 9, Some Secrets. The police concluded that Mr. Walters had simply moved away. They suggested that I had been the victim of a prank or perhaps imagined the whole thing. I knew what I had seen, but I couldn't prove anything. Life returned to a semblance of normality, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The memory of that night continued to haunt me, the flickering lights, the contorted shadows, and the chilling gaze of the man who was both Mr. Walters and yet not. I often find myself looking at the house next door. It stands silent and empty. A new family moved in a few months ago, but they don't stay long. No one ever does. Sometimes late at night, when the wind is howling and the shadows are long, I think I see a faint light flickering in the window. I know it's just my imagination, but still I can't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. Some secrets are better left buried. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. The chilling truth of Mr. Walters and the secrets lurking within his home is a truth I may never uncover, and perhaps that's for the best.